Is this working now? Let's see. Is it working now? Blah, blah, blah. Okay, cool. All right, so I guess to go over what I previously said, I'm going to be talking about Memetic Nanofame, which is this one-off class I taught for MIT's Educational Studies program. I'm currently also teaching a class about children's literature, specifically Alice in Wonderland, but they asked me to give a one-off class to talk a little bit about Jeopardy and what's it like to be a meme and what memes mean in current society. So to give an overview of my talk, I'm going to be talking about, one, the history of memes. Most of you who are tuning in probably already know this. Number two is I'm going to talk about myself in the case study and lessons. Number three, I'm going to shill for comparative media studies, which is a department that I'm not personally in, but I've really loved and have chosen to minor in during my undergrad. And then finally, question and answers. I guess this is more for a lecture presentation. I'm really not sure how well it's going to go over the internet, but I am keeping an eye on Twitch chat, so let's try this. All right, history of memes. So when I say memes, what do you guys think of, right? Like, I guess this is sort of even more difficult because of the lag with Twitch chat, but I imagine that you guys would say something like Pepe, Doge, things like that. Autism, yeah, fair enough. That is sort of a meme on 4chan, I would say. Oh man, so now that I'm not giving this presentation to middle schoolers, I can start swearing as well. But like, definitely like autism and stuff, the tendency to call people new fags or like new fags can't Triforce on 4chan, like I would definitely say that's memes. But to give this like most cancerous slide of this presentation, right, you've got your viral videos, starting from like flash animation to like epic fail things. You go to static images, like, you know, just Skyrim in particular, this image just seems like ancient to me. But yeah, that was definitely like image macros, this like impact font, reaction images and GIFs. Snow clones, which have also sort of died out, but like, you know, this arrow to the knee idea, that's sort of gone away much more. I want to give a shout out to several content creators like Neil Ciesiega. He's been like very much since 2001 still providing a lot of new content. Same thing was Toby Fox, would probably be the equivalent, was Homestuck and Undertale. And then finally there's the weird but cool things which don't really fit into any of these categories. For example, like Nyan Cat, Harambe, these memes don't really fall into under these like stock photo things, but still very interesting, they're all memes. But how did we get here? So even though we have all of these ideas of internet memes, that's not actually where the term meme originated from. So over here we've got Richard Dawkins in his book The Selfish Gene, and talking about the idea of memes as an idea that spreads between people, so sort of genes but for culture. The idea is that memes will evolve, they will mutate, they'll spread virally. So he was interested in talking about religion because he's Richard Dawkins and like militant atheism and all that. But this idea of a cultural unit that can spread among people has been something that's sort of lasted over time. You see that 18 years later, Godwin, who you know from Godwin's law, the stop comparing people to Nazis or that any internet conversation will devolve into Nazi comparisons, sort of applied this concept to Usenet communities, saying that we need to be aware that this meme of comparing people to Nazis is a thing, and we should probably stop doing that for our communities. So Godwin is the first person to apply this concept of memes to the internet. Around the same time when he's talking about Usenet, that's when we're starting to see other internet communities develop. So Newgrounds, Homestar Runner, Something Awful, and then so these niche subcommunities start becoming a big driving force for creating memes as we now know them. Dancing Baby in particular was probably the most mainstream one of these memes. Hamster Dance as well, and All Your Bass is probably like, you know, the oldest one at least that I'm most familiar with. I also think it's funny that in 2013, Dawkins claimed that this was a hijacking of his original idea, sort of acknowledging that the idea of memes has gone way beyond just this cultural unit that can pass on. One thing I'd like to emphasize on this is that this original definition of meme is something that I'd like us to keep in mind throughout this talk, because as we go on, especially when you think of how Pepe has been taken as a symbol for the alt-right, there's a lot of confusion about whether Pepe is actually a, you know, is it just meme magic per se, or is it actually just the original definition of meme being carried over? So now if we continue through the meme evolution, we'll see is that more internet communities start developing in the early 2000s, most notably 4chan in 2003, but other ones like YouTube, Reddit, Twitter, Tumblr, they all sort of come in this early 2000s era. 4chan, as many of you guys know, is probably the most important one of these communities because a lot of memes that became mainstream eventually, such as I Can Ask Cheeseburger, the Lolcats, Rage Comics, and Rickrolling, they all started on 4chan, which later they sort of disavowed, which is also interesting. From 2008 to 2012, this convention called RaffleCon was started, where it was basically this idea of, wait, there are so many celebrities on the internet, so why don't we just all invite them and give talks and things like that? So it was held at MIT every 2 years, and there's a lot of interesting talks because it's not only just a place for celebrities to congregate, but it's also a place for sort of academic discussion to happen. For example, Before the Lull was talking about how the idea of like lolcats, emoticons, they were all not new concepts. They'd existed since the 1800s, and how just the current creative description of it is sort of a continuation of these older forms of media. In 2010, we have mainstreaming the web. So Cheeseburger, the very large conglomerate that owns like Failblog, Know Your Meme, Moot, the creator of 4chan, and Know Your Meme, which wasn't owned by Cheeseburger at the time, had to talk about what does it mean to sort of make them these memes mainstream, and what does it mean to corporatize it. It's very interesting. And then finally, the most relevant talk held in 2012, the last year of RaffleCon, is this idea from microfame to nanofame. I think everybody here probably knows who Double Rainbow is, but Honk Guy is like very obscure. I think, and when I taught this, only one middle schooler had heard of it. I hadn't personally even heard of this guy. And if you try to find the video it's originally based off of, it's taken off of YouTube. So this panel was here to talk about how we've sort of gone from Andy Warhol's idea of 15 minutes of fame to even just 15 seconds of fame. Like, if you think about now, like, me personally as the spiciest meme lord, I've definitely talked to people and be like, it used to be that people would stop me in the street or like talk to me, but now it's very much like, spiciest meme lord, like what's that? You know, same thing for the Honk Guy, and less so for these older stars like Double Rainbow and say like the Me Gusta face. And it's sort of interesting that this From Microfame to Nanofame was on one of the last RaffleCon videos, because RaffleCon actually stopped being held because of this nanofame problem. It was a convention held every 2 years, and they wanted to invite celebrities to it, but no celebrities really had the staying power that by the time that they would invite them and get the conference all set up, they would have enough internet like fame to go around. So RaffleCon stopped being held, and I think it's sort of unfortunate because the talks were definitely extremely interesting. Now, in the mid-2010s, we get this idea of memes becoming very mainstream, right? Like, Republicans and Democrats, senators are tweeting Doge pictures. Harlem Shake is being taken by large companies. And this leads to what Know Your Meme calls the Xeroxification of memes, where original sub-communities like 4chan and, say, Reddit would create these memes, but then they would get copied all over the place onto Facebook and Twitter to more mainstream forms of media. If you've scrolled down your Facebook feed and sort of seen, you know, those videos where it's like a picture and then there's just text at the top, this is pretty clearly what they're talking about, Xeroxification of memes. And 4chan sort of took a punch back at it, you know, especially with the 2016 election, reclaiming Pepe as an alt-right symbol. And I would say also that the trend of technical memes of like, we are number one, but every time they say one, it gets faster. Those things are also sort of retaliation to these mainstream memes by making memes so unpalatable in a way, and like requiring quite a bit of technical skill to produce, so that it becomes more of an obscure niche thing and less of this mainstream thing. All right, so we've talked a lot about memes and we've talked a lot about like how we got to this point, but the real question is, who enjoys memes? So on first pass, it seems like everyone on the internet. On this Google Trends graph, you can actually see the blue line is searches for Jesus on Google, and the red line is searches for memes on Google. And in October 2016, searches for memes actually surpassed Jesus. So if you remember that Beatles quote about, let's see, like, we're more popular than Jesus, and then people were like burning the Beatles records and stuff like that. Well, now like we actually have memes have actually become more popular than Jesus. And if you look on Google Trends right now, the only times that Jesus searches surpass memes are Christmas and Easter. So that's sort of an interesting perspective. So so TJ Hans enjoys memes, as he said on Twitch chat, but I enjoy memes too, right? But then there's sort of this rapid social media sharing, and also if you remember the original definition of meme as this cultural unit going far, it starts to get to the point where you would expect commercialization. So, for example, that's a headline from an article talking about the Harlem Shake that says, "You didn't make the Harlem Shake go viral; corporations did." And people like the original creator of Harlem Shake, like Filthy Frank, definitely did not get as much credit as it did when it started becoming this national phenomenon. Same thing with this Delta safety ad video, as well as this tweet from a representative. So people are knowing that's getting more popular, it's getting extremely shared, but then there's sort of this retaliation of it's popular, now it sucks, to borrow a phrase from TV tropes. As you can see in this tweet from a House of Representatives member, the comment is, "What the fuck is wrong with you?" at representative, right? So there seems to be this retaliation towards memes becoming more mainstream. So even though everyone enjoys it, it doesn't seem like everyone is allowed to enjoy it. So what happens if we ask this question: who is allowed to enjoy memes? So then, as we're going from the mainstream into more subcultures, it becomes really interesting because this idea of gatekeeping really starts to come into play. For example, if you're a college student, you might have known university memes for adjective teens, Yale memes for special snowflake teens, or Harvard memes for elitist teens. These are meme pages, people come into groups and share things. But then when Harvard resends acceptances to students who are sharing very profane memes, granted on a splinter group from these things, this starts bringing up a lot of questions about public versus private, right? They were sharing it on a private group chat, but somehow Harvard can look at this content and decide, no, we're not going to accept these students. It's also talking about how memes are really becoming this force of pretty great social impact. So that's one interesting thing. Another interesting thing is Black Twitter. You can see in that bar graph up there that Black users on Twitter they are significantly more than, say, the white users, which is contrary to what you would expect from normal demographics. And then this is actually a pretty powerful force. Black Lives Matter started as a hashtag and not as a movement, or rather grew into a movement. So then this begs a question of whether calling it Black Twitter is sort of a segregation or if it's a celebration of these racial groups. You also can remember the Pepsi ad and compare it to another picture which came from the Black Lives Matter movement, and whether the same commercialization appropriation is coming from this community. Finally, r/TheDonald, we've sort of touched on Pepe as an alt-right symbol for a while, but at the same time, right, 2010 memes, you've got middle school comics made on 9gag, and then 2016, it seems to be this meme magic, this geopolitical force deciding elections. But then this also, again, this bears the question of is this actually, the memes that are doing it, the internet memes, or is this just the original definition of memes, and also considered a memes of fake news or build the wall that's sort of been coming out of this campaign. So a lot of interesting questions, and also if we go further into the gatekeeping behavior, for 4chan in particular, the site of where many memes are created, but also the site where a lot of profane behavior happens, you get this in-group, out-group dynamic. Think about the term normies, for example. So one scholar of Anonymous said in the New York Times that, quote, "Each bit of apparent idiocy is an in-group, out-group marker. You do these dumb comics, you put captions on cats, you do all of these things to show that, I'm a cool kid, I'm not, part of the mainstream media." And you can see how this gets more complicated once the mainstream media happens. You can also see this from the tone of memes that are coming earlier about, there's often referencing gaming, YouTube poop and You Demand Now Dog are older memes, but definitely share the same sort of obscurity of haha, let's just loop this clip several million times, or just mash up all of these Dr. Eggman quotes together. Then one thing to note that is this is not new behavior, just like you're saying, I can't read your username, but can I in the comments, right? So, you're always using terms like new fag, and also having this picture, which I think is really funny, which is 4chan trying to reclaim rage comics from Hot Topic. And if you read the text, it says, the corporate shit that is Hot Topic has now decided that memes are to be the latest cool thing amongst 13-year-old emo consumer whores, and so are now selling t-shirts. This is only the beginning. If this is allowed to continue, then it'll only be a matter of time until /b/ starts getting fucked every meme, or I don't remember what was there, starts getting fucked every meme to be turned into the next Icon Has Cheeseburger. And before long, /b/ will die. So then what did they do? They decided to make Rage Guy into Race Guy and make it an extremely racist thing. This worked for like a day. Hot Topic said that they were going to take down the shirts, but then they realized that 4chan was trolling and like they put the shirts back up. But it's sort of interesting if you read this, right? Like, it's definitely the in-group, out-group dynamic going on. This fear of, like, your special niche sub-community is going to die, so you should make it poisonous so that nobody else is going to take it. And then, like you said, like, the hijacking going on definitely reaches a new level as Pepe because there becomes mainstream media acceptance, right? Like, we have the Deplorables comic, which was, I believe, shared by Donald Trump Jr., talked about by Hillary Clinton, and then before you know it, like, the media circus was all over this, like, poor frog who is now in the Anti-Defamation League as a hate symbol. Alright, so enough history, and now we're going to go into the case study of sort of what is, I guess, sort of my experiences. I'm not sure how video streaming is going to work on this, but I hope that all of you have seen this clip of, like, who is the spiciest meme lord. That is me in the MIT shirt right there. So this provides a lot of interesting questions because I did get my fame through Jeopardy, which is a mainstream media application that, like, is national television, right? But then I sort of, under this gloss and, like, very polished demeanor, I sort of slipped in this reference to internet culture, the what is the spiciest meme lord. So what can we make of this? What do we tell about the two, like, intertwining forms of media? So the first lesson that I learned from this is that mainstream media is not dead. This is a little embarrassing to me, like, as a media studies scholar, because you would think that, like, oh, like, of all people, I should be the one who know that, like, media is a powerful thing. But it turns out there's actually, like, a lot of media talking about, you know, the fact that mainstream media is dying, right? Like, millennials are, like, killing everything, you know, Hollywood, TV, print, like, it's all over. But if we look at this, right, here are the Nielsen ratings for programs, for national television programs. And Jeopardy is the third most syndicated network television. 5.5% of all American TVs were tuned in to Jeopardy, like, a couple weeks ago. And that meant 8.5 million viewers. So I don't have any conception of, like, what's a million people, let alone, like, 10 million people, right? Like, this is just numbers to me in the air. So, like, in the normal standard of before social media of how information would flow, there's me sort of getting picked out of nowhere by Sony Pictures, who produces this show Jeopardy. I sort of go on there. They have their very established TV outlets, newspaper syndication, all flowing out of there, and eventually reaching 9 million people, right? And so then there's me thinking that, like, oh, this is just going to be interesting for, like, my friends and my family, and, like, they'll see me on TV, it'll be exciting, that's it. I think that most people, when they want to be famous, are only considering this green portion right here, right? Of, like, so, right, like, this green portion of just, like, oh, I just want to have these, like, the people that I know be affected, and, like, you don't think about this giant blue 9 million people. But now that we're in, like, the social media, whatever, digital age, now the graph looks a lot more complicated. We have this huge red mess here, which is interesting because it's not only that, right, like, these newspaper and TV outlets are now affecting, like, the social media sharing, but it's also putting arrows the other way, right? So you've got these 9 million people here who are now probably going to go on Twitter and, like, tweet about their experiences. And then all of these social networks inform each other, right? Because you can be on multiple social networks. Another thing to note is that we no longer have, like, a good picture of what's going on, of, like, how many people are going to be affected by this. Granted, Nielsen ratings are also a guess of how many people you're going to affect, but also, and you can also do, like, say, YouTube views or, like, retweets or reblogs, but it's still, I would say it's a much worse estimate, right? Because, like, it's much easier to just, like, look at a piece of information on the media and not interact with it on any ways. Think about how many like news articles you just scroll through on your phone, or like Facebook notifications that you just pass by and don't really interact with. Another interesting thing about this red part is that now the chain of information can flow the other way. This big red arrow right here, now people are going to be able to try to contact me individually. And I can contact them directly through stuff like my Reddit AMA, right? I no longer have to go through this blue network in order to talk to people, in order to get more information. Now people can bypass this very established syndication process and just directly talk to one another. I can also just affect more people than just my 300 and so friends and family, and now I can talk to, again, who knows how many people. I can look at how many upvotes I got on Reddit, but that's really like not a good estimate of how many people I have directly affected now. So again, sort of to drive this point in, let's take another one of the things that got viral from my run on College Jeopardy, which was this category called Let's Rap Kids. This was picked up by both mainstream media, CNN Entertainment is talking about it, and then also it's getting some social media traction. For example, this Instagram thing is Gucci Mane's Instagram, and I was apparently on it. A lot of my high school friends were very excited about this. But one thing to note is that this category was created by the same mainstream media thing, right? So like down here is some of the Jeopardy staff. So everyone knows Alex Trebek, but on the left we have the question writer, the head writer, and then we also have the executive producer for Jeopardy. So these people are like average age of like 50 or 60, and they're trying to write for an audience of age 20 or so, right? So obviously there's going to be some mismatch, and you can even tell from the question itself, or category itself, Let's Rap Kids. It's very clearly of like, we're not part of this community, we're going to go through the old channels of TV studios, newspapers, and like whatever traction that we can get on social media, that's great, but like it's not geared towards kids these days, right? It's very explicitly not. So then if we look at my comment of who is the spiciest meme lord, right? Again, I was thinking in the old form of media, so I was thinking like, oh, this comment will just be funny to, my friends here, right, who like put on memes all the time. But I neglected to remember that, no, we've got both the mainstream media, there's the Boston Globe article, we've got like, social media that I can't directly affect, so that's me on r/poll, or not r/poll, I'm sorry, 4chan/poll/, right? And then we have, direct friends and family, but also mediated by social media. So this is my godfather wishing me good luck on Jeopardy and encouraging everyone to watch. So this is a very different model again, so that I'm now affecting who knows how many people, especially that red arrow right there. So to make this discussion a little bit more academic, here's a quote from a book called World Made Meme. And in it, Ryan Milner says that this new kind of participatory conversation complicates the traditional culture industries. When age-old gatekeepers intertwine with new ways of sharing information, the relationship between collective participation and individual expression becomes ambivalent. So, right, age-old gatekeepers, that's literally like Sony Pictures, NBC, these are like probably some of the biggest stalwarts of Hollywood. New ways of sharing information, we have social media, and now they're intertwining. So now the idea of collective participation, the audience and individual expression of like me, goddamn saying spiciest meme lord, like there's not a clear divide about where like my personal life starts, where my public persona ends. There's no clear divide in there. And indeed, like part of the things that I saw from this is that these channels are getting merged. From both friend connections and from social media, I ended up getting a burrito named after me. Like, I don't know what to make of it. There's also a beer on Untapped called Spiciest Meme Lord, and I've reached out to them, and they've just been like, oh yeah, it was really funny, I saw this on Reddit, so I decided to make a beer out of it. Like, what? I don't understand. Likewise, so that picture on the bottom is the president of MIT, and so again, through mainstream media, because MIT is a large institution whose publicity offices, they deal with, big events, that plus this dumb, like, spiciest meme lord thing ended up like him giving a shout out directly to me at commencement. So it's this very weird like mixture of both like the mainstream and like the subcultures coming together. Remember how I talked about the arrow also going backwards? So these are actually personal Facebook messages and emails that I have received. So that the big one is the only one that I responded to because it was a very sweet message. But all of the ones on the right are sort of showing like people thinking that because they saw me for 20 minutes on television that they can reach out to me directly, that they can like, you know, ask me for money and things like that. Even the main one about like, oh, my daughters watched you and really loved your moment, like it was very bizarre to me to realize that I was actually having an effect on people's lives. Somebody messaged me saying that they were in the hospital for a family emergency, and like me saying the spiciest meme more just like really brightened up the room when they were dealing with this very stressful situation. Like I can't really conceive of what's going on right now, right? Like people across the nation who I'm like never going to interact with, and like this is the only chance that I have, are reaching out to me or like insisting that they can talk to me directly. So it's a very weird media flow than it has been in the past. Also interesting is here's like /TV/ I believe, talking about what's going on here. And I selected these posts because they are talking about both the idea of memes and also about other media in general, right? So like we have references to 9gag, we have references to Reddit, you know, fucking normal fag on /TV/ falling for waifu bait. She's obviously a disgusting Redditor normal fag who probably thought the Shrek/LazyTown memes were the funniest thing in her life. Yeah. So like it's funny because again you see this in-group out-group dynamic, trying to have possession of the memes and like, you know, just feeling really confused. Some people are really excited that like, oh, the internet is leaking out, but there's also this huge amount of defensiveness about like these are my memes, these are from my community, I don't like to see them being commercialized in this way, and sort of doubting whatever credentials that I have. Just to finally drive in this point, the top two images are things that Jeopardy itself created. Obviously, as a multinational company, they're trying to capitalize on the success of like that this thing is going to go memetic, it's going to go viral. So they created these things, a Snapchat filter and an explanation video where they asked me to say like, what does the spiciest meme lord mean? This is also particularly relevant for Jeopardy because the average age of people watching is 65. Which I think is really funny because they are definitely not going to have any idea about any of this. On the bottom is a picture that one of my friends made, who was just really excited about seeing me win and like decided to make this out of the blue. And if we compare the two sort of images, right, like the memes referenced in the top set are lolcats, double rainbow in the corner, deal with it, and Doge. The average age of these memes are like 2010, I would say, so that's what, 7 years ago. Meanwhile, the thing on the bottom is much more current. There's still a 2010 meme, but it's like Sanic, which is definitely much more obscure than say like the deal with it meme. And so like you can definitely see this different audience of what is like the actual internet residents versus what is this mainstream media who is trying to understand what to do about that whole red social media portion and not really succeeding at it. I want to end off this section of mainstream media is not dead with sort of this anonymous post, which I really liked, which is, you know, green tech story of be a smart Asian engineering student shitposting on national television for money. He, she is living the dream. So I really like this one because it is sort of referencing that these streams are getting crossed about, you know, national television, shitposting in this very weird way, and that like I am in some sense living the dream. I also still really like that they don't know what gender I am because that's sort of like typical 4chan. You can't say anything nice on the internet. Okay, so that's done for lesson 1. I'm glad that you are still listening to me. So now on for lesson 2, which is that you do not own your own image. So, I don't know, this is probably more obvious nowadays because we are internet residents, but it's sort of interesting. So one day I got this email in my inbox, pretty boring, pretty standard, just like, hey, come to the MIT Democrats State Convention, we want to send some residents over, which would have been fine, except this image was attached, you know, who is the spiciest state convention delegate? And, like, I don't really know what to make of this, right? I actually had people come up to me and say, oh, how did the convention go, right? And, like, I didn't agree to this image, like, I didn't say anything, like, they just used my image on this. Later they apologized and said, like, oh, we should have asked for permission, but, like, you know, at this point, like, there's not much I can do about it. But this isn't the weirdest thing that people have done with my image, right? Like, people are sort of taking my person and arguing for different political views. So like MIT Democrats actually wasn't the first. On the left, we see r/the Donald saying, like, being really excited. There are a lot of posts about like our girl, you know, like wow, what a centipede and stuff like that. You know, is this a direct reference to Trump? Again, a lot of in-group signalings of like keck dollars, woke af, and meanwhile on the right you see a bunch of random public Facebook posts. I don't know who sets their privacy settings to public, but using the fact that everybody in that Final Jeopardy was Asian as like an anti-Trump like polemic that they could rally behind. How's that for Trump's melting pot, making America great, but like ironically, and you know, we are not a monochromatic country, our future is in diversity. And so like, again, all of these people are making what, like some summary out of 20 minutes of national television. It's also funny that like this person down here is saying like, you know, how does everyone know she's a Trump supporter? And then someone else is responding about, think about it, you'll get it. Again, in-group, out-group signaling, my image is not my own, people can do whatever they want. And it's not just political things too, right? So like, this was on like the Photoshop battles of Reddit, and like, I'm like kind of creeped out by this image, you know? Like, I don't really like the idea of like John Travolta and Joe Biden like kissing me. I actually really like the clam image. I think it's really funny. But you know, so like I had an AMA, right? Like I again have that backwards, or I guess I have this arrow that I can directly talk to people. So why don't I say anything about these images? Why can't I say like, look, I'm not comfortable with the MIT Democrats using my image. I'm not comfortable with these Photoshops. Well, there's something called the Streisand effect. This is probably, again, review for most of you guys. But Barbra Streisand is a famous singer. The picture of her house was used in some online database about coastal erosion in Los Angeles. So so her lawyers looked at it and they tried to sue the people, saying like, please take this image down from the internet. Of course, what happened was the Streisand effect, which we now call it because of this case, which is that by trying to sue to take this image down off the internet, it ended up going like very viral, right? Like, see the picture that Barbra Streisand doesn't want you to see. And the lawsuit didn't work, which is why I'm showing this picture right now. And so that it's just this name of like, if you're trying to take something down off the internet, you can't. In fact, you're probably going to make it more popular in the first place. So the fact that the image is not my own, and I also can't do anything about it, just means that you sort of have to accept like whatever the internet is going to throw your way and just kind of deal with it. So again, some other examples. One is on the left. This is actually a pretty respected MIT professor. He teaches differential equations to like freshmen, sophomores. But now, like, his graduate students look for him, and this is, like, one of the #1 images that they find, and just saying, like, what? But, again, nothing that he can do about it. On the right, you probably know him better as Hide the Pain Harold. It's a series of stock photos that got photoshopped into amusing situations. But I definitely recommend clicking that link and watching the interview of what goes on. He's a 70-year-old Hungarian retired electrical engineer and was just not really expecting like any of this to happen. He just Googled himself, and now he's like very famous. In the interview, his wife is sort of talking about like how like they asked him and his wife about how to deal with it, and his wife is just like pretty upset, like feeling that it's an invasion of privacy and that like they can't really do anything about it. But Arado, I guess, or Harold has sort of accepted it and just been like, you kind of have to go along with it. All right. So that's it for lesson 2, and now on to lesson 3 about fame is a trap. I think this one's particularly interesting because I definitely, you know, growing up, you just think of like, oh, I want to be famous, I want people to know my name, I want to be on TV and stuff like that. But the thing that I find is that you really don't think about it that much, right? Like, again, your world, like, suppose that it's not just your friends, you also want your enemies to know you, for example, or just even acquaintances. That's still only going to be 1,000 people in this giant thing of 9 million, right? Like, what, 1,000 over 9 million is less than 0.1% or something like that? Or it's 0.1%, right? When you go national television, like, it just blows up. You just have no idea who's going to look at your image and things like that. There's an interesting article which from The Ringer, which is basically asking the question, why do so many attorneys go on The Bachelor or The Bachelorette? It's not good for your career. and it's not good for like, you know, any legal applications they want to do. So why do they do it? It's an interesting article, and they interview a lot of people. I do recommend reading it. But I like this quote from a former contestant, which says, "There's literally nothing to be gained other than people recognizing you for about 6 months and having a nice conversation piece at your disposal when things get awkward and you have absolutely nothing better to say to anyone. Best case scenario, you don't totally embarrass yourself," right? And so I would say that The Bachelor, Bachelorette has been sort of staying within this mainstream model of just the blue and green arrows that we've seen. So then, like, you know, if nationally, if you still don't really get anything from fame, you know, then like, why do you keep saying that I want to be famous, I want people to, I want my name up in lights, all of these things. And this problem is getting even worse when you remember that nowadays we have this sort of whole red portion of the graph, right? That we have this like huge social media thing where things are getting shared and you actually have no idea if it's going to be 9 million or if it's going to be less, it's going to be more. The way that this especially comes about is in infamy. So there was this tweet by a former PR person called Justine Sacco that said, "Going to Africa, hope I don't get AIDS, just kidding, I'm white," right? So she tweeted this, about to go on a plane, she flew off, and then this got huge, you know. And because she was on the plane, she didn't know what internet reaction she was going to get until she landed. So everyone on Twitter was just sort of being really excited about, like, you know, when is Justine going to land, and like see that all of this stuff is just waiting for her. On the left is the New York Times article talking about this experience. It's been written 2 years after the whole tweet scenario, but this whole culture of like, you know, like outrage and just sort of like manufactured unhappiness about things is really sort of a big thing about internet culture. Sort of one inflammatory thing gets blown up really big. And I also like this picture because one thing that often happens in internet conversations is that there's this weird mix of a very private, intimate conversation that can suddenly become extremely public, right? Like, you can easily imagine that bird picture of, like, the little birds are just talking to each other, and then all of a sudden, like, everyone is just focusing on it. Yeah, definitely, like, horribly unlucky, right? Like, it just so happened that, like, probably one of her followers just saw this and was like, oh, you know, like, I can't believe she said this, you know, retweet, viral, you know, one thing, chain reaction, right? But even in other things that, like, so like, not just like a public Twitter account, right? Like, consider your email, for example. I would say that I consider my email to be private. I would get very upset if someone were to share my email and, like, forward it to just, like, everybody, or, like, post it on, like, a public forum like this, right? But legally, emails are public, actually, right? Like, if a company ends up getting into a legal lawsuit, part of the things that they can do is they can sue and get, like, all of the bodies of emails that have ever been sent. If you think about, like, the Hillary Clinton scandal that we went through, or the Donald Trump Jr. scandal, like, emails, what you think are private, can actually be very public. Same thing was, like, that happened on this public Twitter case. This is also why when you email lawyers, they have an extremely long footer saying, like, oh, you know, like, the contents of this email cannot be distributed, or, like, legal action, or blah, 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 right? So it seems really weird because, you know, like, say you share a funny video, and they'll be like, haha, that was great, and then this huge footer at the end of it, right? But it's exactly for things like this whole thing about the conversations on the internet can suddenly turn from public to private, or private to public extremely fast, and you can't control it, is something that's in there, and that's why lawyers are very protective of it. This is a quote from Monica Lewinsky. I think this is really interesting because, so when she had her affair with Bill Clinton, she was actually about the same age as I am right now, 21, 22. Obviously, like, what she did was, like, got a lot more international attention. It was also in the days where there wasn't the social media aspect, but she still got, like, extremely attacked for this, right? So she came out in 2014, so I guess, like, 20 years after the event or so, talking about sort of internet culture and what she's seen based on her experiences with infamy. And she says, we have created a culture of humiliation that not only encourages and revels in schadenfreude, but also rewards those who humiliate others. We're caught in the feedback loop of defame and shame, one in which we have become both perpetrators and victims. We may not have become a crueler society, but the internet has seismically shifted the tone of our interactions. This like pretty hits dead on about like in this search for fame, in the search for like public notice, it's actually very easy to get infamous. So like I said, I personally feel really lucky that I can get these lessons without having to, have sex with the president, and instead just like a very dumb thing, but like I can already tell all the ramifications that have happened. A lot more things have been affected in my life than I would have guessed, right? Like, I'm glad I had this experience just so that I know what's going on, but if it was anything less innocuous than this, it could have gotten really bad. All right. So for the final lesson about what I've learned from my experiences, I'm going to end with the medium is the message, which is a pretty important concept in media studies. So start off of like, why is the internet like this? And like, is this good or bad? Should we do anything about it? I'm going to have a quote from one of the RaffleCon organizers, which is that people get hung up on whether these memes are good or not, but that's not really important. The best corollary is just regular pop culture. Is pop culture good? That's debatable. But there's a whole subset of people for whom the internet is their pop culture. So it's important to study the internet because, again, this is some people's pop cultures. This is like what some people spend most of their time, free time, thinking about. So we get into this idea about the medium is the message. So that Marshall McLuhan, oh yeah, that I didn't end up like Ken Bone, right? Like, so that's also a thing about sort of not understanding how this works, right? I don't know if I have a picture convenient. I guess this one will do. This is definitely like not an awareness of how the internet works. So I would say that's like definitely part of it, right? Like, again, mainstream forum, he's on the debate floor, and then so this blue line is definitely what he was expecting, right? But he's Reddit savvy enough to know that, I can capitalize on this. He starts like a t-shirt line, I believe, and like gets probably made some money that way. But then his big fault was that when he went on to do the Reddit AMA, he used his personal Reddit account instead of his private one, so that everybody was like able to see all of his porn preferences and like all of the raunchy behavior that he had done. So like, yeah, it's definitely this weird mix of like, not knowing the implications behind it. I think it's also a pretty honest mistake to make, like, because he's probably like 40 something or 50 something, and this idea of like making a throwaway count, making your details less visible, probably didn't come into his mind. Alternatively, he was thinking about all of those sweet internet karma, and like he probably did get a lot of internet karma, but yeah, it's unfortunate. All right. Let's see. All right. Medium is the message. So this concept in media studies this comes from the 60s, Marshall McLuhan. And basically it's this idea that any message that you send is inherently intertwined with the medium it itself is sent in, right? So you cannot extract the message from the media that you sent it. Like, structure is tied with content. And the classic example that he uses is a light bulb, which is a medium without content. So a light bulb, right, like if you turn on a light bulb, it carves out space in the darkness. Like, light is where moths gather, it's where people come and like are able to do things. And even though there's no content, it's just light, the medium itself of the structure of light, it creates things. We often ignore what the structure of the medium is and solely consider the content. But what Marshall McLuhan is trying to say, that it's important to consider the structure surrounding it. And this becomes even more important when we're on the internet, because we need to consider this idea of remix culture, where remix culture is this idea from Larry Lessig, and he was thinking more about copyright. Larry Lessig had connections with Aaron Swartz and things like that. But if we're considering about like this memetic, one unit of internet culture, the structure in which you're working in will lead you to remix in certain ways, right? Like how reblogs or retweets work, or how conversations are structured, are going to encourage you one way or the other, regardless of what the content is. And this goes for internet memes and the original definition of memes. So, looking keeping in mind like Medium is the message, I have the selection here from Reddit, my personal email, Facebook Messenger, and jboard.tv, which is a Jeopardy forum discussion. And just from these examples, you can already see, just ignoring what all the posts are saying, you can see definitely how the structure of the medium causes different messages to be interpreted differently, and also like how people correspond with it. So for example, if you're looking at the forum, which is like a pretty old standard way, it's in the top right corner, one thing to notice is that the content of the message is on a much bigger focus, right? All personal information is put on the sidelines, and although there is some personalization, right, like here's this Trump, I guess, avatar, it's much more to the side. It's much more about discussion-based things, and it's supportive of long-form answers. Similarly with Reddit, we see less of a focus on personalization, actually. Like, we see just the username is basically the only thing that's there. Certain subreddits you can have flares, but they're like very subreddit specific. Also, this nonlinear structure about having like it be collapsible allows people to go down on one conversation hole instead of the forum structure where it is very much encouraged to like stay on topic, right? So like here we have this discussion about whether I'm a girl or not, just all within this sort of hierarchical framework. Meanwhile, if we look at the more conversational-based medias, for email, again, not as much personalization and like much more focus on the thing, but it's also a little bit more explicit that it's sort of one-to-one, right? Like it's from this username to me, right? I find the Facebook Messenger the most interesting if you're taking this sort of structure-based approach, because from the looks of it, right, it's less of a focus on a name, it's just a picture. That's like probably the ultimate form of personalization. And to me, it almost looks like you could just draw a little arrow right here, and then these circles would become speech bubbles, right? It's very clear of like, this picture is corresponding to like this thing. And then if you look at it side by side, right, it like definitely feels very conversational. Think of like iMessage, for example, they're doing the same thing of they don't have pictures, but the same thing of like circle, like almost speech bubble like things, one after the other in a sort of conversation form. Again, so if we look at Reddit versus 4chan, 4chan keeps this linear structure, but it's different from the forum structure. One, there's like almost zero focus on the personal content. It's all anonymous. They can't even put like any sort of flair or anything onto it. It's also very difficult to follow because, right, like if we go here, then we say, oh, this comment is responding to 1437, and then like we have to think like, oh, that means the first one on here. There's no really linear order. It's sort of hard to follow. For Reddit, on the other hand, there is this personal identity. It's more easily collapsible. This conversation flows. So, like, if you're going to try to find like a single thread of conversation in 4chan, it's much more difficult, right? It's just like all of this conversation going back and forth, and like, you get snippets, but you're not even sure of like who's responding to who, right? If you try to read this linearly, you might see like, you might think this anon is talking like /TV/ just to see if anyone saw this. You just know. If you're not an experienced user, or if you're uncomfortable with this interface, you might think this you just know is directly responding to the one above it, Meanwhile, like Reddit's sort of like nested structure makes it much more easier to find conversations. And then also, so from this perspective, it makes sense that people would think of 4chan as more of like this hive mind entity and less about Reddit, which has more personalization. Finally, so I think this is also part of the reason why mediums such as like Twitter and Twitch chat, which I don't really have any examples of because I don't know who streams Jeopardy watchings on Twitch, but by far, out of all of the medium that I encountered in my Jeopardy run, Twitter was the most vitriolic, I would say. Like 4chan even wasn't as bad as how bad Twitter was. And I think like a large part of it is because of this embedded medium, like the structure of Twitter itself, right? So having used a Twitter clone called Mastodon, which is sort of like this open, open source version of Twitter, I had a really hard time having a discussion with one of my friends, right? Like when I would go on to Mastodon, I couldn't catch up on old conversations. The only notifications I had were people were talking directly to me, right? So on Twitter, the ways you either look at it is either by looking at one person's tweets or by looking at sort of like chronologically or by comment, right? So like on the left, I just searched Asian Jeopardy, and then like I got sort of this wall of text of like, right, they're all fairly racist or like not good, but it makes it seem like there's a huge coherent opinion about things, right? Or if I look at one person's thing, I just get this like this story, but like in each part, it's just very terse, right? There's not much information you can get around in 140 characters. I hate MIT. Is that podium rigged? I hate Lily, right? Like you really can't get much more information out of there. I think it's interesting that Twitter has sort of gotten this way, but Vine ended up becoming a medium for comedy, because one could also think of like short, punchy text as being a comedic vehicle. And while there are a lot of jokes on there, I think it's been like very bitter. Let's see. Yeah. So yeah, definitely, right? Like I think that's also why Twitch emojis or reacts are so popular, right? Because when someone puts a kappa down, it immediately grabs your attention, right? Like, and then when you see an entire stream just like filled with kappas or like filled with Craigasms, like it's definitely an experience that you wouldn't normally encounter, right? I think this is also why people prefer smaller streams, because like they get to interact more directly with the streamer involved. Yeah, I think there's something really interesting about like the reacts on. I'm actually not sure what it's called, like emojis, reactions. I'll just call them emojis, but yeah, definitely something. But like it passes so quickly that like you have no chance of seeing it. And I also really liked experiments like for Twitch Plays Pokemon, like playing with this like huge hive mind nature of Twitch chat in order to do interesting things. But yeah, I definitely agree about like, Twitch chat being like 4chan, you can't have any sort of conversation. And like also Twitch chat does have a lot of problems with harassment and stuff like that. So it's interesting. All right, so summary of the lessons that I covered from this part, which is 1, mainstream media is not dead. 2, you do not own your own image. 3, fame is a trap. And 4, the medium is the message. I'm pretty happy with the series of lessons just because, I don't know, I feel like it summarizes my experiences pretty well. Yeah, I just don't really know what to think about fame and everything. So that's the end of my Jeopardy part. And then the big question is, right, is like, why does any of this matter? It seems a little bit ridiculous to be talking about memes, Twitch chat. Definitely doesn't seem like something you would talk to your grandmother about and like have them understand. Like, why are you wasting all your time playing video games or talking about internet pictures? So this stuff matters. It's because this is our culture and we need to understand what's going on, right? Just like we try to understand history and why wars are fought or like why social trends happen, this is what our culture is currently, and we need to understand what's going on. Gamergate, for instance, I really like this graph because I think it's, at least for me, I think it's the clearest understanding of what's going on, right? Someone is attacking female developers, and then it sort of gets hijacked into this big campaign of like, let's attack everybody, women, game researchers, and stuff like that. And I mean, like, you can say that, like, oh, it's about ethics in video game journalism, but, like, as a media studies scholar, like, I have had my colleagues been attacked by Gamergate proponents and things like that. So how can we even, like, begin to understand sort of, like, what this graph is, right? Or, like, because to be fair, like, if this was even more accurate, there would actually just be, like, arrows pointing at everybody of, like, everyone attacking everyone. Because nobody really understands what's going on with this. It's so amorphous and, like, there are actually legitimate concerns about ethics in video game journalism, but like it's kind of getting drowned out through all of this. So how do we understand that people are talking about video games and having like very negative reactions to it? Similarly, in the middle part, like this is taken from an Atlantic article asking about remix and plagiarism. So someone created this art of Michelle Obama, and then it later showed up as a mural in Chicago. The original artist was like, yo, dude, you're like copying me. And then they're like, no, I'm not. I'm like riffing off of it and giving it new life. So how do we understand what's going on here? Well, if you look at the tools about like medium as the message, about remix culture, and then sort of like digging into the ethical concerns about that, like we now have a way to approach this problem. Finally, the way that I was able to even have this presentation at all is because of this sort of media studies training. It's helping to me to make sense of what's going on in my life when it's sort of like this very weird intertwining of many different things. So this is leading me to do the shill of comparative media studies, or AKA I can study memes in college. Yes, in fact, yes, Virginia, you can. Also, you can study video games and many other things. So comparative media studies is this department in MIT, but it's probably equivalent to other media studies departments around the world. So taking it from their website, they say critical analysis, collaborative research, and design across a variety of media. There is a class at MIT called Media Systems, or Credit for Reddit, where you're trying to understand like these big systems that I talked about. There's a class called Network Cultures, which is where I got the book The World Made Meme from. And they actually wanted to invite me to talk about memes for some of the sections of the class, but I couldn't make it. And then finally, design. You can actually get humanities credit for actually designing video games, because part of the design process is understanding then how, gameplay and other things work. So this is, for me personally, I minored in comparative media studies, and this is just a short taste of all of the things that I've done. I've looked at children's literature and the 2010 Alice and sort of tried to understand how childhood's changed over time. I've written essays about Pikmin, Tetris, GDQ, in particular, like trying to understand the speedrunning community. I've talked about color and film, including one film, which was just literally an hour of a completely blue screen and then people talking about it. And then I also got to make a text adventure about daydreaming in class and also tater tots. So you can pretty clearly see how there's analysis, research, and design all baked in here. I was actually studying media studies before I was on Jeopardy. This only out of this list, only this color and film class at the end did I do after I was on Jeopardy. So yeah, like, I don't know. I think it's really interesting because there are a lot of articles about people being like, I'm on Jeopardy, or like, there's an NPR person talking about how to do fame in Jeopardy. Like, she said an answer that was like calling liberals pansies, I think, and that kind of got a lot of traction. There's another article about women in Jeopardy getting harassed. It's called Big Tits for 600. It's an interesting read, and that was actually sort of my first exposure, and I was very nervous about being on Jeopardy because you're essentially doxing yourself, right? They tell you your name, they tell you like what hometown you're from, they tell you what school you go to, and that's all sort of put on national television, right? And because Jeopardy is such like an old show, they're on like their 34th season right now, they don't really know how to handle this whole media aspect. In fact, it was from other previous contestants where I sort of got information about locking down my profile and trying to avoid internet harassment. So yeah, like definitely a happy accident that I was studying media studies before Jeopardy. I guess you put it as an either or, but whatever. So here's some quotes from two professors that I was most inspired by doing comparative media studies. And the first one is from my film professor, Eugenie Brinkema, who says, when I have trouble understanding something, theorizing helps. And that's definitely been like sort of the theme of why I even bothered to make this presentation in the first place, right? Of just sort of theorizing about my experiences is helping me understand like what even happened. There's also T.L. Taylor, who was probably the first person to apply sociology concepts to video game studies. And she really pushed me on writing my essay, saying, it's not enough to just describe a situation. Keep asking yourself, why does this matter? What's at stake? And so that idea of just sort of keep on pushing it, it's not just like, it's a funny picture on the internet. It actually has weight to it, has really also sort of helped my studies go on. And so finally, to sort of close off, I have these two quotes, one from Godwin, the first person to apply the idea of memetics to internet, and then another one responding to the election and the alt-right reclamation of Pepe. So on Godwin's side, it says, most people on the net, as elsewhere, have never heard of memes or memetics. But now that we're living in an increasingly information-aware culture, it's time for that to change. It's time for net dwellers to make a conscious effort to control the kinds of memes they create. So, and that's in 1994. And then nearly, 23 years later, we have this one from many respected games I guess, network media studies scholars who have studied anonymous, studied like those hacking behaviors, and they say trolls in the alt-right may have played a prominent role in the 2016 election, but that fact is dependent upon and cannot be untangled from journalistic coverage that amplified their messaging, shitpost memes very much included. This is like hitting upon the fact that mainstream media and social media are not separate entities. You have to consider both together. And if you consider Godwin's call to action to control and be conscious about the kind of memes you create, this is sort of trolls in the alt-right being very conscious about it, but sort of in ways that we don't really approve of. Alright, so that's the end of my talk. I guess I can leave you on this slide, so at least it'll be on the archive if you want to check out more information. Unfortunately, PBS Idea Channel is sort of off now, but Captain Christian is really good. You can also see all the panels from RaffleCon 2012 on YouTube, which I think is really interesting. And then there's also all these books. I guess disclaimer, I haven't read all of these books, but they are all on my need-to-read list. I'm trying to get sort of the work that I've done about speedrunning communities into a publishable conference paper, but I have been busy. So, yeah, I guess that's about it in terms of this presentation. Wow, I need some water, but whatever. Yeah, I guess I was planning to either play, I was planning to play Shenzhen IO right now, so, yeah, it is still very weird talking in a room by myself, but, I guess, like, if you guys will bear with me while I go and set up the channel. So I think that, yeah, I mean, like, that's why I wanted to do it, right? Because, like, in terms of ways to connect to people, it's definitely, this is how you do it, right? Like, there's a bunch of other streaming things of, like, YouTube and Facebook, but this is sort of best. So, I'm not sure if this is going to work. So, please let me know if, like, the audio, what do you mean, error? What? Okay, well, this is Lily debugs why Shenzhen IO doesn't want to play. Restart computer, clear down cache is probably gonna be it. Oh, friggin'. What is going on? Okay. Well, this is unfortunate. Yeah, because I didn't want to play Shenzhen IO because I guess sort of the story behind why I'm wanting to play Shenzhen IO is because I've actually done electronics manufacturing at Shenzhen. So when I first started playing this game, I just had a lot of feels, and I felt like it was going to be very entertaining to stream. So that's why I'm here. It's always a good idea. Okay, Steam settings, downloads. Okay. Settings, downloads, Steam library folders. Parent library folder. Okay. Whoa, okay, this is a lot. Yeah, so, right, so I guess some more background about myself. I've talked a lot about me doing media studies, but actually my day job is that I'm going to be a robotics grad student at MIT. So I've done various internships at Apple. I'm actually wearing my Apple shirt right now. I'm not sure if you can see it. Allows installing. Okay, hopefully this fixed it. What? So, okay, Steam, settings, clear download cache. Okay. Well. Yes, Shenzhen IO is named after that city in China. If this game ever loads, it should become clear why, because it is. Because it is all about electronics manufacturing. Like, literally, the game is. Oh my god. What is my password? Yeah, it's probably not good that you guys can see my username, but whatever. What is my password? Alright. I might be coming back in a bit, but yes, Shenzhen.io is named after the city in China because it is about, like, you literally go, you wire up a bunch of electronics, you read data sheets, you do signal processing, and you just try to get circuits to work. You write in assembly as well. So, yeah, that's why it's called Shenzhen.io. I've done internships at Apple and Square, and I've actually gone to Shenzhen, also Dongguan, and tried to do manufacturing there. I have literally been on the manufacturing line trying to debug why is the circuit not working. So, yes. The same guy who made this also made TIS 100 and what was the other game? Space Chem. So he's all about these puzzle games and stuff like that. Okay, I'm going to end the stream right now and come back in a few minutes once I remember what my password is. Yeah, so see you guys then.